Level up. No, you can't give us the countdown, so I was thinking level up. Welcome to Let's Talk About Gay Stuff. Woohoo! Mm-hmm. The podcast where we talk about gay stuff and discuss the week in LGBT history. We are Thomas.
Tony.
Kendall.
All right. Welcome, boys. Howdy. This week,
Thank you.
we're reviewing the week of August 18th through August the 24th, and we'll discuss Marsha Johnson, Chelsea Manning, and the birth of today, what's known as today's trans flag. So, before we dive into these fun topics, what's going on? Any fun stories this week? Any dish?
You know, I usually have so many fun stories. I'm just going to
Tony.
take the week off. I don't want to dominate the podcast, so
Have you been keeping your fun stories from us?
that corporate job. Woo.
that was sarcasm, Kendall.
I suppose
If I ever had a fun story, I would be like, bitches, forget the podcast. Let me spill.
the whole story.
Actually, last week when we were doing Sunday Fun Day, I was asking Chris, the bartender, I was like, oh, sorry if I was like out of control on my birthday. He's like, everyone was like so crazy. I was like, sorry if I was. He goes, you were in the corner like, ready to go home.
And then you did. You ghosted out of
Covered in
there.
vomit and stool.
Yeah. No, that was you.
That was you the week after.
Wah, wah.
Maybe one, but not both. Vomit and
Right.
stool.
Surprisingly, so which
Reminds me of a joke. What's the number one pickup line in a gay bar? May I push your stool in?
Da, 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 da.
But may I, Tony?
Wow. Hello. So
Anyways.
we celebrated Spencer's birthday this past week, and
Yes, our intern.
happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Spook.
I think everyone behaved themselves. Well, no, everyone behaved themselves. There was
Yes,
nothing
it was a
dramatic.
great birthday.
We went to Max's Wine Dive for brunch because we celebrated more or less on the Sunday Fun Day with the extended friends, and nothing too crazy. We didn't get kicked out or storm out like we did previously during Pride.
Like you did, maybe.
Like I did, but we had a good time, and then we did Sunday Fun Day, and I think we had from what I recall, it was
It's
fun.
amazing.
Yeah, it was a good time. It's a good day to be out. And then on your actual birthday, we had a pool day. We went to a nice dinner.
We
and
all
then,
didn't. Some of us had to work.
Yeah, some folks had to work.
But I'm not bitter.
Tony had to work, and then we went to a nice play. So that was fun. It was a good week, very relaxing, busy work week, and then
You
busy.
thespians, huh?
Well deserved.
And we saw the theater on the lawn at Miller Outdoor Theater
What
in
was it?
Houston.
What
It was Julius Caesar.
Oh, nice.
So it was good. And then I think Spencer was all into the Julius Caesar because the next day we had Caesar salad for dinner.
Nice.
So it was good. And then
Did he stab it 37 times?
he did.
E.T. Brutus.
It's been an interesting week though because we also
E.T. Brutus.
yeah, we as some folks may have seen on the Facebook Live video, we have been staring at a box of tampons on our recording desk.
Ew.
Speak for yourself.
Trying to figure out why these are here. Well, they're here, of course, because our friend and from our Spoopy podcast, Chris, a la Dixie Wrecked, was performing and advanced to the next round and
And
her
she
drag
used them as
competition.
props. She threw them out as party favors.
Yeah. So how would
Dipped in red Kool-Aid.
so this was all inspired by Kendall.
Kool-Aid.
Kendall, what was the? Tell us what you inspired, because you inspired it. So I feel like you're due some.
The dirty damn
Yeah.
tampons.
Come on. I'm literally asking you to tell the story.
Oh my God, I don't want to. It's
Just
trashy, and I'm
tell
not
him.
a trashy person.
Okay, you made Chris do it, so you need to.
Well,
spill the guts.
the category of the drag competition was trash, or so we thought. We later found out it was plastic, but it was too late at that point. But it was trash. So I said, I can't believe you're making me say this. I have grandmothers.
Yep.
I said, well, go all out then and get some tampons, dip them in red Kool-Aid, write "call me" on them, and throw them at the judges.
So he swung them around like tassels.
And she twirled them like tassels, flicked them at the judges, and progressed to the next week of
Yeah,
competition.
he dipped them in red Mio so that they looked like they were bloodstained. So that was nice. And then the next portion of her competition, what did she do? What did you advise her to do as the design consultant? Come on.
The creative director.
Yes.
Well, Dixie likes to fashion herself a trash queen, just a trashy, raunchy. Am I wrong?
No,
No,
that's
yeah, right.
yeah.
Okay.
The,
I don't watch that.
Ashley,
What,
what's
taking it too far.
what is it? What
That's a
the
persona.
From our
cashless ass
She says cashless, assless, and
Classless.
Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're on brand there.
So I said, if your song's "It's About to Blow" by Kesha, I get words wrong, so it's probably like one of those. Words
Roll with
might be
it.
Right. She, I said, pull out a dildo and just start blowing it, and then on the second verse, put some fake coke on that dildo and just start doing
Blowing
that
it.
blow.
Yeah. So
Get it all over your face. And she did it, and she brought the house down.
Yeah.
People were just screaming, throwing panties and
She,
other people's panties.
she
and
blew the
diapers.
roof off the building. I mean,
Ugh.
people were excited with all that blow. So it was an interesting take on blow. So it was on brand for Dixie. So we were proud to see her go to the next round. So hopefully when this is airing, Dixie's still going strong in the competition. But yeah, so we'll see. She advanced to the next round. But that was fun. But now we have a box of tampons, and we spent our dinner trying to figure out how tampons work. I think we figured it out. How the plastic application's used. If anyone wants to give us information about how they are used, you can actually
FaceTime tutorial.
we
Is that what
don't
you're
no
asking
we
for?
don't
You
care.
are bisexual.
No videos, thanks. Keep the tampons in the trash can.
All right, enough about that. Let's
All right,
talk about
so
Hey,
Kendall,
Steph.
so what happened? Anything happened for you this week?
perfect segue to Jan Savastina. No offense,
Hey, Jan. Hey, Jan.
Jan, very sweet lady, listened to our podcast and sent us a few questions. 3. We'll answer one tonight and the other ones in future podcast. But the way it was worded, the entire message I thought was very thoughtful and sweet, and you can tell she just is a good gay ally, I should say. But the first question that we're going to answer tonight from Jan is, how do you all feel about the way in which feminine men are often disparaged in the gay community as being less hot?
I hate it.
Why, Tony?
Because we talk about this a lot. I feel like, like drag queens and transgender people had a huge impact in where we are today. And I feel like, gay people, like, we know what it's like to be judged or be discriminated against. And so, to me, I hate it when we discriminate against others for shallow reasons. And so, this especially because it's because of, like, feminine people that are where we are today and why we have the rights that we do today. And so, I don't think you should be discriminatory towards anybody for something superficial like that, but especially since, people that are like, oh, no femmes. It's like, well, the femmes who were really suppressed are the reasons they blew up. Like, they blew up, and, like, that started the gay rights movement.
Thomas.
That's why I hate it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like when anyone's kind of prejudged for something, especially being femme. You get the same thing with people that are bottoms. It's like, oh, they're a big old bottom. I'm like, well, that's fine. Like, it's okay to be a bottom. It's okay to be a top. Like, and
What would
people,
the tops do without a big old bottom?
right? And some people shouldn't. I mean, you shouldn't be
Jars
ashamed.
of livers,
You shouldn't be
chicken
ashamed
livers.
if you're a bottom. Like, if that's what you do,
Yeah.
then that's. I mean, the world needs bottoms and the world needs tops. So it's just like, I don't like, people make fun of that. They make fun of femmes, and it's not like, that's not anything that I think is appropriate. But at the same time, like, I will say, like, you don't have to be attracted to a femme person. So because I'd like a more masculine person. I mean, the joke is, yeah, I'm bi, but I'm like, you can have preferences, and I think that's okay to have.
I agree. 'Cause, I mean, it's one thing to have a preference, and that's what you're attracted to. But then I've never seen you at a gay bar look across the bar and be like, look at that femme queen.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
and you can, and I think there are femme queens that are attractive, and I think so. It's like
Yeah.
I don't care, but I like either a man or a woman. I haven't, and it's not to say trans people aren't attractive. It's just like I would be attracted to a trans person, or I guess there are trans people out there that I am attracted to. But I do like a masked man and a feminine woman, right? But it's not this. So
Yeah,
I
'cause
say that,
think
but
there's
that's a
difference
preference.
between what you're attracted to and what you like versus, like, just on the face, like, mistreating somebody.
Because to
or
me,
making fun of somebody.
because the way I view it is like, it's like liking someone with dark hair versus blonde hair versus red hair, right? It's just that's how I view it. Now I get that some folks, they take it a step further and they view it as they think someone who's femme is disgusting, or someone who's black or Asian or Latino is disgusting, right? And so when you start to say, I only date these people, I'm like, no, that's where I think, like, you should. people should be more open-minded, because looks are one thing, but obviously, you dig in deeper, and you want someone who's smart and has got a personality. And what am I filling out a dating profile? I already have what I want here.
Jan, I have two things to add. First of all, Tonti said, "What's a top without a bottom?" Well, I had a family member who couldn't find a bottom, so he would. This is not a lie. Bury a jar of beets or chicken livers in front of his trailer and used to pound it in the front yard just to get that feeling of a
So
bottom.
that's a top without a bottom.
No and no. So that's what you do. That's what a top does with a bottom, I guess, in Louisiana. But second of all, I hate it.
Montana, we have sheep.
Or Montana, where Tony's from.
We have sheep.
See what happens when gays can get married? You can start dating, sheep and chickens.
But I do
just kidding.
Hate it, because I think it's actually part of my topic I want to bring up later. I think some gays think because they've been oppressed, they're allowed to discriminate more against other people. And there's this very segregated sense of entitlement there's a hierarchy, so many gay people think, of at least I'm not femme, or at least I'm not a bottom. But were you sure looking for the bottoms?
Yeah.
It's
interesting you say that because...
yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, because... So I had one of my old roommates. He was like, pretty decent looking.
What an endorsement.
No, he was pretty decent. Not a 10, but I mean decent looking. But when he was like growing up, he was like very fat, into band, whatever. And I never knew him then, but I just imagined
band.
If you were really heavy,
no, that's what
you
band
were
is part
like
of.
into band. You probably were like teased as a kid, and obviously pretty feminine. So you're he probably got teased as a kid. So now he like lost a lot of weight, pretty decent looking, and he is a complete fucking bitch. And it's like,
that's insecurity though.
Yeah, because my thing is, it's like, dude, I know what it's like to be discriminated against. That's why I'm like anti. Like
you're in the band too, is what you're saying?
Yes. But it's like, I agree. Like, I don't think it should give you a right. You should have empathy for, I know what it's like to be discriminated, so I'm not going to be that guy.
Yeah, but the queens are. I mean, on Twitter, it's the worst. Like, I mean, to call people dad bod that are sculpted, but just because they have a little bit of extra poundage on them, they're like, you're fat. And it's like, no. All these queens that don't have a six pack, they're like, you're fat. It's like, get out of here. Like, it's too much.
It brings out more discrimination. However, it gives you more opportunity to find people that don't care, because I think in the last few years, maybe it's just me getting older, but in the last few years I've noticed that there's somebody for everybody.
Exactly.
There's some people that like a little chunkiness, and there's some people that like a hair lip.
I agree. Like, I feel like when I was younger, I used to always feel bad about like my body because I was never like six pack or whatever. But then the older I get, I'm like, yeah, for every pot there's a lid, and for every body style there are people that are into that, and so now I'm like, who cares?
Every pot.
Just own it.
Have you seen my
cheeseburger?
Have you seen my Tupperware drawer? There's more tops than bottoms, so that's what happens.
For those beets
Maybe I
and
should hang
chicken
out at
livers.
your Tupperware.
That's right.
There's
You're
more
missing
tops.
the-
There's more tops because you buried those jars in the yard. You're
No,
free.
that wasn't me. That was That was your people. So yeah, but I mean, just to like punchline, at least for me, like I don't. I think there's a clear distinction between being attracted to someone and being discriminatory against someone, and discriminating against anyone because of what they look like, I think it's just
stupid.
Yeah.
Confidence is the most important.
Yeah.
I agree. Like you said, it's probably like insecurity.
Always.
Yeah.
If you're putting someone else down, unless
it's
they're
make
being
yourself
vicious to you,
right?
It comes from a place of like, there's something about myself I don't like, so I'm going to
draw
attention
them look bad.
to your...
Yeah, exactly. So,
yeah,
we love the femmes. I straddle the line. Hell, I might even be femme.
You taught Martha how to walk in
Kendall,
heels.
you are super femme.
Thank you.
That's why I get so passionate. I'm like, I don't want anyone being mean to Kendall. Like,
let him be femme. Although I will say this, because I mean I do. Not to like extend this conversation too long, but I mean I do think there is. Again, I think it's a matter of my attraction. I don't discriminate. I just Spencer and I'm gonna air our laundry, Spence, but he said, I want to buy pumps, and I'm like, okay, well that's cool, but it has taken me no, not penis pumps, like nude pumps, like high heels, yeah. Shoes. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then as I think about it, I'm like, well, what does that mean? But it's one of those things that it's just for me. It's not. It has not. Like I've taken some time. I've had to translate what that. Of course, I overanalyze everything, but it's something that I have had to like adjust my thinking. I'm like, okay, this is.
Which is good. It's always good to challenge.
Yeah, it's not what I would wear, but if Spence wants to wear that, then I'm like.
And Jan, you asked a good question because I could do a full 2-hour show on this because I've been watching. I love the show Queer Eye with Jonathan Van Ness on it, who like says he says he's gender non-binary. I don't. Yeah, even I don't know all the terminology, but he's got a beard and long hair, and he wears dresses, and he's like, I like both. I can have a beard and wear a dress, and so much of how we treat people is we're brainwashed to say this is what men are supposed to do and this is what women are supposed to do, and the entire concept of coming out as a gay person is upending all of that. So why do it within our own community of you're a man, you're not supposed to be femme? Excuse me. Yeah, you butch masculine man, you got a penis in your butt.
To me, one of the funniest like drag queens that I've been to a few of Dixie Rex performances. I don't know who she is, but basically she's got a beard, but then she's like really sassy. I love her.
Oh, that was me.
Oh, okay.
That's Kendall. You mean Jacqueline Drouard?
Is that her?
No, Blackberry.
Blackberry?
No, it's not Blackberry.
Either way, both of them, if you're listening, we're trying to we watch you all this show. Come join us. Talk about your drag
Which
queen.
We could do a whole other topic about how drag queens are treated, celebrated one day, and then looked down upon by certain... Anyway, Jan, great question. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I mean...
In the future, we're going to answer more of your questions.
And I guess to that point, if anyone's got any other questions, feel free to let us know. Jan brought those questions up on Facebook. But any of the social media platforms, let us know. We'll take a look at it and see how we can...
Or if you have ideas for topics, because a lot of our ideas are either U.S., national, or Houston-based. So if you have... any ideas for a show?
Let's talk about gay stuff.
Yes, we like these questions. We might even name it. It's the Jan segment.
Let's talk about.
Oh my God, the Jan segment.
Sponsored by Jan Celestino.
You can.
So we can have her as a guest.
You can reach us at. You can email us at. Let's talk about.
She didn't mind me using her last name.
You can. Well, she posted on Facebook, so she can see it as a public post.
She loves it.
You can email us at letstalkaboutgaystuff@gmail.com. So before we go swing into our gay topics, a little word from our sponsor. Hey, are you a small business owner trying to do it all? Take marketing, for example. Nowadays, your business has to have a Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter account. Who has the time to take pictures, write posts, and get them posted online, let alone comment, share, and respond to followers? We hear all of the time that this is on every small business's to-do list, and Economy Works is here to help. So let the Economy Works Talent Network help you with your marketing so you can grow your business. Economy Works. When we work... The economy works. Woohoo! Find out more at economyworks.com. So, with that, Tony, why don't you swing us into our first topic?
Kendall, speaking of drag queens who are celebrated one minute, condemned the next, vice versa, Marsha P. Johnson. So, Marsha P. Johnson was a drag queen that was pretty instrumental in the Stonewall riots and gay advocacy at the time. So, and... her whole life is kind of summed up in some ways she was very like celebrated, and then in some ways she was very condemned. And I feel like looking at her life, in so many ways she had an amazing life, but then in some ways, God, she had a really tough life. So, Marsha P. Johnson, she was born very like middle class family or blue collar family in New Jersey, and she was pretty young. She was like 5 or 6, and she tried to wear a dress, and she got made fun of. And so ever since then, after that, she thought, oh my God, being gay is it's like a dream. It's nothing.
Wait, she was born in 45?
Yeah, this weekend, 1945. So in her mind, being gay is like something to dream about, but you could never actually do because, she had that negative experience. But then she made her way to New York as a pretty in her teens. She went there with $15 and a bag of clothes. So once she was there and she met gay people, she thought, oh, I can become gay. And she kind of started, being more free or whatever. So she identified as being gay, being a drag queen, being a transvestite. There weren't really a lot of trans terms at the time. And so she was very active in fighting for LGBT rights. She was a very generous person. She was people that were kicked out by their families and made their way to New York, she would kind of take them under her wing and kind of help them out. She and some friends founded a trans organization. They were instrumental in starting a kind of a homeless shelter for LGBT youth. I mean, she did a lot of work for AIDS, things like that. And she had a pretty awesome life. I mean, she didn't have a lot of money, and she was always known for kind of wearing flowers in her hair. And the reason that happened is she was homeless for most of her life, and she would sleep under these tables in the flower district where they were making flower arrangements. And so she would collect the flowers. And but her, at the time, a lot of drag queens were very extravagant and things like that. Well, she didn't have a lot of money for fancy clothes, but her drag was more kind of like comedy, political, like grassroots drag. And she went to San Francisco and performed. She was part of a couple of drag queen troupes. She went to London to perform. So in a lot of ways, she had like a really awesome life. Yeah, I mean, she kind of within the gay community, she was very well known. She was very known for really being active and out there and really fighting for rights. Very generous. But at the same time, from the time she was in her early 20s, she was pretty much homeless and forced to be a prostitute. I mean, it was kind of like survival sex, as it's coined. Because she was so feminine.
Wait, was she living as trans?
Yeah, so she moved to New York, and as soon as she was around gay people, thought, okay, I can live as basically a drag queen. And so Marsha P. Johnson actually stands for Marsha Pay It No Mind Johnson.
Ah.
Because when people would say, are you man or you woman, she's like, pay it no mind. Because she was kind of a very tall, she was slender, but probably like a muscular, more of a masculine build.
Mm-hmm.
But she was a drag queen. And so people would say, are you man? Or she's like, pay it no mind. So that's what the P stands for in Marsha P. And then Howard Johnson was a restaurant. She was a waitress when she moved to New York. And so that's how she came up with her name. Pay it no mind.
But she lived as a woman.
Yeah, so she basically lived as a drag queen, yeah. And so she was too feminine.
Wait, a drag queen, or I want to get the
She wouldn't really say.
transgender, right?
She wouldn't really say. So she identified as a transvestite. They didn't really have when she was alive, like transgender. And she was very kind of like.
Well, I say that because like RuPaul, for example, right? RuPaul has a persona of, the woman in wig with high heels, but also lives RuPaul Charles, right? Last name.
No, I think she lived as a
Yeah.
And so she was too feminine to get a job, and so pretty much from her early 20s on, she was homeless, prostitute, and she was even at the time, trans people were just not accepted by the gay community, and so they were kind of excommunicated. And it's interesting because even though drag queens, so it wasn't very long before Stonewall that drag queens were allowed in the gay bars in New York. And the drag queens started the fight, and they were really the ones that started Stonewall, which, transformed the whole gay rights movement. But then in 1973, she and her friend, Sylvia Rivera, there was a gay rights rally in New York in 1973, a few years after Stonewall, and they were kind of not really welcomed. Was being organized, they heard about it, and they didn't want them there. And they showed up, and they wouldn't let them really say anything. And so her friend made her way up on stage, and she's like, trans people are the reasons you have the rights you do today. And by an entire group of gay people, they were booed off the stage.
This is mid-'60s, right?
73.
Oh, 73. Okay.
So, yeah. So,
they were Stonewall.
Yeah.
Because they were at Stonewall.
Yeah, and so she was actually instrumental. So she was, a lot of people said there were 3 drag queens that really started the Stonewall riots, and she was one of them. She actually says, I think I was there kind of after it all started, 40 minutes later, but she was basically the one that she threw a shot glass and shattered a mirror, and so it was coined the shot glass.
She made up for lost time.
Yeah, the shot glass that
way to make an impact, girl.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, she was instrumental in Stonewall, and then 4 years later, they were like, we don't want you, because they said people like you are gonna slow down our progress. That was the thought of the gay community at the time.
Well, there's a documentary right now, because Marsha P. Johnson has really been learned about in the last few years.
Yeah.
there's a documentary on Netflix about her, and that there's some new interviews unearthed that she gave not long after Stonewall. So people are really, and part of it is we want to put a face to, we talk about Patrick Henry. We want to visualize people. Patrick Henry said
Right.
the British are coming. We want to put it's hard for us to figure out Stonewall, and I think Marsha P. Johnson has kind of become the face and the symbol of Stonewall. Rightly so, I think. But there's a fascinating documentary about her, and Sylvia's in it. And there's footage of her at that rally getting on stage, and the gays were booing her, saying you're not... The feeling was very much, you're not a part of our group.
Yeah, exactly.
It's trans issues, and to this day...
Right, exactly.
Just
I mean,
like we
Houston
talked
a few
about...
years ago.
I mean,
yeah.
Jan was asking about femboys, but it could honestly be, you can substitute that for trans. We're not quite on the same page. It's getting better, but even within the gay community, it's very segregated.
It is, yeah.
We're learning to break down those walls. And in some ways, it's getting worse. We'll talk about that in my topic, because I got some notes on that. But Marsha P. Johnson was kind of has turned into the face of Stonewall, for one. Do you want to talk about how she passed?
I can.
Before I get there? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead with that, because I have views on that too.
Okay, yeah. So I guess the two things I'd like to say are, she had this great life. She performed drag in San Francisco and London. She was very well known in the gay community. I think she loved life, but she was also homeless, prostitute. I mean, she spent her whole life kind of in a cycle of, she had mental problems, so she would go to a mental hospital and kind of get treatment, get on medication, get well, and then she would get out. She'd back on the streets, and she would get off that, and she would start having issues again. And so, and she was, we talked about this, like at the time, trans prostitutes were beat up, not paid. Some people had their genitalia mutilated, whatever. So the way she passed away, they basically found her body in the Hudson River, and it was immediately deemed a suicide. But people fought, and they were like, no way. And so they did find like wounds on the back of her head. And so it was debated for quite a while. But then I think in 2002, sometime in the 2000s, they reopened it, and it's still an open case because it was not a suicide.
My theory is the police never liked her. She was, in their minds, a troublemaker. She was there for Stonewall, and those people kept a grudge. And can you be any more invisible than a black trans hooker?
Right. A very
Did they really
masculine
care?
looking, yeah.
How much money and time and effort are these detectives going to spend into finding
Right.
out, was this a suicide or a murder?
Yeah.
I mean, there was no even investigation for anyone to say confidently that it was or was not a suicide. My thing is, watch this documentary while it's still on Netflix, because if you want to understand the trans experience as someone who's not trans, I'm not trans, so I have to do it as like an outsider and trying to empathize and understand and all that. You cannot be more marginalized on the outskirts. What community do you belong to?
Right.
You belong to only the trans community, because the gays are not necessarily walking arm in arm trans, and the straights certainly aren't.
Right.
I really feel they've been left behind to an extent to where we're just now starting to talk about it, but we had to get gay marriage legalized and had to, end Don't Ask, Don't Tell for us to even be like, okay, well, now we can address their issues. Yeah,
and we've talked about it before that, the whole debate of sometimes like people wanted to purposely drop them because it would make our movement progress faster. Yeah.
The gays thought, you're holding us back because you're just a step too far. You will never pass.
Yeah.
And the murder rate for minority, especially black, trans, I'm not going to say hooker. I mean, obviously we can subsect it to where it's, make it higher and higher. But if you're black and trans, you're far more likely to be murdered than probably any other group.
There have been a few of them since I've lived in Houston, right? Like kind of southeast Midtown, yeah.
Well, there was an article today about it was the 14th trans or black trans person killed this year.
But do we know those stats because of the progress the LGBT community as a whole has made? Like the fact that we, because that gets lost when the big fight is marriage equality or serving in the military, those sorts of, you know what I mean? It's like those conversations are only happening today because the LGBT community can now focus on that. It's
That's
not
what
to
I'm
say
saying.
it wasn't an issue, it wasn't a focus area. It's just like the loud voices were, and the majority of voices in the community were.
They're a minority among the minority.
Right,
You know what I mean?
but I don't even think it was purposeful. It was just like we're trying to.
In some ways, it was purposeful.
Well, I mean, it sounds like in the 70s, yes, it was purposeful, right? And
Well, no,
there were,
even today, if we're going to talk about how we treat femme men and look down on them and say, ooh, gross, and even gays call them faggots, then surely that discrimination is far worse for actual,
Well,
quote, men that want to become
well, and
women.
just to that point, I mean, and you taught me this using the F word, right? I mean, to the extent that we start to, it's an interesting kind of thought because I mean, if you start to use that word more often, right? Because we're saying we're going to own the word, right? And we're not going to use it in a hateful way. I think it gives people who are Trumpers they feel like they have the right then to call us that in a derogatory way. Does that make sense? Because we're using it, and they're like, "Well, I heard Kendall say
Just
it."
for a little backstory, I call it the F word. I don't like it, but I have also gone through a journey of I'm not going to be dictated by someone else's. You're calling me this. Perhaps I'm giving it power to say that the word, and I cringe every time I say it because I've been called it a million times and know how it made me feel to be called that. Like what the word faggot really means, faggot equals there is no greater scum on earth. There is no one below you. Now remember, I'm 36 and I'm talking about up until high school. So the word in itself is just vile. And then I have a discussion about, well, why does a word need to have power over me? To where I'm afraid as a grown man to say the word, like I don't want the word faggot to leave my lips.
Right.
Because it scares me even to this day. That sounds so weird. Here I am 36.
But it's something that like it brings back emotion, right? Like,
well, and that's the thing,
there's
though.
something you can't
So there's that
separate yourself.
emotional trigger that you feel when you hear it, right?
Yeah.
Because it brings back memories. But I guess my point is it because you say it now, and you're like, well, I own the word now, and no one's gonna make me feel a certain way about it. Because you say it now, because you have that ownership. The casual Trumper, for example, that hears that,
I don't think
they
about them.
they think that. Well, my point is, they're like, well, Kendall said it, so therefore I can say it too. You know what I mean? They feel like they have a license to say it, and so when they're gay bashing, someone or doing a hate crime on a
to me, it's
transgender
personal
person
journey first. Let me deal with the word and how it affects me, because the way it affects me might not. Because there are many, many gays that throw the F word around. Just like the controversy within the black community of using the N-word.
Yeah, because I was going to say, go ahead.
So it's not the same to everybody. And it is different perhaps to a 36-year-old than it is to a 21-year-old. So the way I look at it is first, okay, there were years to where I said, I wouldn't allow anyone to say that word around me. You will not use that word around me. I kind of like this. This has progressed into a discussion of the F word. Y'all okay with that?
Yeah.
And then it was kind of like, but why am I giving them the power for me to care?
Well,
that's a good point. Yeah.
Just on that point, though, so where I was kind of hoping we would go is because since we're talking about transgender, right? I mean, the whole, and we've talked about this before, but RuPaul, right, getting called out on saying was she-male and tranny, like those. So those were, I mean, and RuPaul pushed back and said, hey, I'm an ally, right? Again, I maintain that if people hear RuPaul saying it, then it gives them license to say, well, RuPaul says tranny, so I can say tranny too, right?
I feel like... Are you finished?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I feel too, though, like, that says a lot about the person because me, like, I would never use the N-word. Just because I see a black person use it, they can. I can't. And so if somebody says, oh, well, they use it, I can, it's like, who the fuck are you? That's just like what a low person you are. Because I feel like... Just because if I say it, I can say it because I've been called it whatever. Like, if some straight guy says it in a derogatory way, it's like, you can't say it.
I do think there's a hypocrisy. Thomas and I have talked about this before. There are certain words beeped out. I haven't seen anybody on television being allowed to say the F word, I call it, or
Yeah.
the N word. But cunt and bitch are just as...
Especially the C word.
Yes,
Yeah.
I know. They're terrible. So if I'm going to... How can I learn from my discrimination that I've experienced? If I'm going to say I don't like the F word, then I need to equally say it's disgusting to say wetback, which I don't use, or the C word. All these terrible words that I try not to think it's all about the F word for me.
Yeah.
So I don't know where I'm going with that.
But I think the point is, though, it lends an interesting discussion in terms of where we started this discussion, right? It's like the LGBT community has been moving forward with things about gay marriage and employment and housing equality, gays serving in the military. Transgender folks have been left behind, right? And then you have that aspect now, but now there's a conversation about transgender people, right? You're starting to see the statistics on the murders of transgendered people, and then we've got into this discussion about how we use some of these words of tranny and faggot and whatnot. And so, it's evolving, right? I mean, it's all, to me, I can't, and like I said, it's hard to say we needed to go through this journey when you've had all these transgender folks having to go through their personal journeys without a lot of support, and two, being murdered at a disproportionate rate. But not a but and you just had to have, I don't know, you just had to have that.
This is why straight allies are incredibly, incredibly important.
Yep.
Because we're always going to be a tiny little minority of the population.
Yeah.
So whatever probably straight casting director casted Laverne Cox on Orange is the New Black, or has casted any transgender person, or even allows Jonathan Van Ness on Queer Eye to be gender non-binary, they're the ones in power because they're in the majority.
Yeah.
It is super, super important, and that's why I was actually touched by this message that Jan, whose question answered.
Yeah.
Her question was so thoughtful. We're going to get into some of her questions she asked later. But she really hit the nail on the head that I think a lot of times I have spent years and years, even to my parents, of saying, I know you're not trying to hurt me or family members. You're not trying to hurt me, but I need you. You are the voters that affect all of this.
And people are listening to you
and every single gay person can vote, and we will never get anything done at all unless people have some compassion and empathy and say, really focus on why do I think this way and why do I care if they have a job, get married, question my religious convictions, whatever. Because if they don't analyze their own views, we ain't got nothing.
Yeah. And that's why it's important, I feel, for everybody to just be out, because if gay is a concept, people are more likely to be discriminatory against it versus like, oh, but Kendall's gay and he's really nice. Like, do I really hate gay
you don't
people?
know how many times I've been told you're pretty cool for a gay guy.
Oh, yeah.
And it's insulting that, well, I know it doesn't sound like it'd be insulting. It is insulting.
It is, yeah.
But I also knew at the time
that,
this is progress.
Yeah.
This is progress to them. Yeah. Because when you're in the minority like that, you have to be more patient for other people's ignorance.
Yeah. I guess just to kind of close the loop on Marsha P. Johnson, one thing that is kind of interesting, we talked about the Compton riots a few weeks ago, and that was completely lost to history until a PhD student found a blurb in this archive. And so she was really not, like, for years, she was kind of like went by the wayside of Marsha P. Johnson as far as being known and things like that. And I don't know what kind of gave her and especially like her and her friend Sylvia like resurgence, but now, I mean, there's been 2 documentaries about her. She has been like kind of a main, not the main, but a main character in 2 movies about Stonewall. I mean, RuPaul has mentioned her as an inspiration. For World Pride, she was there was a mural, and she was part of the mural. And now, like, she and Sylvia, and this is kind of interesting. So she and Sylvia are getting their own monument in Greenwich Village.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and the reason for this is the reason they are being a monument is being made in their honor is I don't know who made the decision, but basically they're like, you know what, the LGBT history is very whitewashed, and
Oh, yeah.
you know, it's like in everybody's mind it was a bunch of like, you know,
Preppy white boys.
preppy white boys that were in Stonewall, and it's a bunch of drag queens that grabbed their heels and were stabbing the cops. And
Well,
so,
because if you're the most marginalized, say you're racially minority and you're trans, what do you have to lose? You've already been kept out of society. I mean, this is in the 60s,
Yeah.
which was
Oh,
relatively
exactly, yeah.
recent.
yeah, I think the more oppressed you are,
So
the
of
more
course they're on the
yeah.
forefront.
And so, but then, you know, you get into like gay history, and it's like, it's very whitewashed and whatever. And so I don't know who it was, but whoever made the decision that they were like, you know, there needs to be a monument near Stonewall that honors these two people, because they were the representation of people that, you know, were responsible for Stonewall. So,
And you said it, representation. If you look at the civil rights movement, there were thousands upon thousands of people for literally hundreds of years that worked up until today. But we put Rosa Parks as the face of it.
Yeah.
Even though that was planned and she was chosen to go intentionally refuse to get up and all that. If we look at World War II, Anne Frank, we can empathize with her.
Yeah.
And I think Marsha P. Johnson is kind of turned into that figure of, okay, we can take this person's life, examine it, and understand the whole movement and purpose.
And I hope so. I hope this monument is really represent, because if you look at her, she was very masculine looking. She didn't have a lot of money. She was in not the greatest clothes. She had like leftover flowers in her hair. And so, you know, she was this average person that, you know, and she's responsible for where we are today. And so hopefully they make it very accurate and true to her, and not kind of like, you know, prettify it, I guess.
I think it's also important in that we not look away or hide the fact that she was a prostitute because she had to be.
For her whole, I mean,
Who
literally,
was
she
gonna
moved
hire
there in
her?
her teens and in her early 20s, and she died in, like, I think at 45 or 46. And so, for like, from early 20s to when she died, so, like, you know, 20-some years of her life, the majority, she was a prostitute. Like, and I mean, she was, poor thing, I mean, she was a prostitute, but she was also, like, in and out of mental hospital. You know, she had mental issues. And so, yeah.
Well, the sad and hypocritical part is that these were people leaving their wives to drive into the city
Mm-hmm.
to find a man dressed as a woman, because that's how they got their kicks. And then there's a reason why so many are found murdered and beaten up. People have sex with them a lot of times and then kill them because of how disgusted they are by them and how disgusted they are by
with themselves.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
So just the hypocrisy of that happening, and it happens to this day, unfortunately. It's just now becoming a huge issue within the LGBTQIAPRST hashtag, pound, all that kind of stuff.
All right, let's not mock all of our
Oh my
brothers and
God,
sisters
that's
in
why
the community.
A queer umbrella, it's the term. Okay, but anyway.
LGBTQ plus. All right. So that was a good discussion on Marsha
Yeah.
P.
Awesome lady.
Come on, P.
Awesome.
Marsha P stood for, what was that again?
Pay it no mind.
Pay it no mind.
mind.
All right, I like that.
That's how people should live their lives. Pay
Yes,
it no mind.
pay it
Mind
no
your own
mind.
business.
All right, you guys ready to talk about Chelsea Manning? Yeah,
Is she cute?
she's pretty. She's pretty.
Just kidding.
So this week in 2013, on August 21st, Chelsea Manning, at the time she was known as Bradley Manning, was sentenced to 35 years in prison for releasing hundreds of thousands of classified documents and videos to WikiLeaks. So, and then she was sentenced this week, charged with 22 counts and found guilty of theft and espionage, but not found guilty of kind of one of the key things that would have kind of put her away for good, which was aiding the enemy. The day after her sentencing, she came out as transgender via a statement to the Today Show. So this what case is to me like very interesting. One, because of the politics. Like I didn't pay attention to this story, when it was happening. I heard WikiLeaks. I knew of what was going on. I knew that Bradley Manning was transitioning to Chelsea Manning. I recall that, but I just kind of really stayed away from the conversation because to me, I didn't want to. I guess this reveals my political slant, but I was like, to me, it didn't look good on the Obama administration. And to the extent that I played dumb on it, I was just like, I don't know, like that's something that happened. I didn't want to have to like try to defend Obama blindlessly, and I also didn't want to have to bash Obama for having that break in during his tenure. But nonetheless, I didn't follow it, but like I said, as I've dug into it, it's been pretty interesting. Not only, like I said, from the politics standpoint, but also from the fact that the journey that Chelsea's gone through as a transgender person. So Chelsea was born again Bradley in 1987, always kind of presented as a boy from early age. She always knew that she felt different. She described her childhood as feeling awkward, but always gravitating towards playing house versus kind of the more aggressive boy games that she was also often pushed into playing. Her parents divorced at age 11, and she lived with her mother, who she claims was an alcoholic. I say she claims because there's a lot of, like, her family has stayed relatively silent in terms of all of the controversy surrounding Chelsea Manning. Because her mother was an alcoholic, she wasn't functioning very well. Like, she couldn't do the day-to-day stuff. So Chelsea and her sister basically had to fend for themselves on many aspects. So as Chelsea wasn't going to school in her elementary and elementary, middle school, and high school years, she was bullied at school. In her teens, though, she realized that she liked boys and came out as gay. And with the help of the internet, she realized that she wasn't gay, but there was another aspect to her that she hadn't really explored. But she realized she wasn't alone because the power of chat rooms and things like that. She was exploring on the internet, learning, and she just saw that there were other people who were going through the same experiences that she was. But like I said, she put herself into bucketed herself as gay, and that's kind of how she lived her life for a while. She eventually moved in with her father because her mother was not able to really take care of her. However, that was not a good relationship, and eventually Chelsea, again Bradley at the time, pulled out a knife on her father, and so then she was kind of banned from the house and went to go live with her aunt in Maryland. There, she started to seek help with a therapist. And explored her LGBTQ side and the LGBTQ scene a bit more because she was living in the Metro DC area, and we all know how gay DC is, right?
That's just the Republican congressman.
Okay.
All good.
So she joined the military in 2007, kind of after some reflection, and she enlisted in the military as a way to figure out who she really was. She was still kind of battling this: am I really a woman? Like, is this something that I am, or am I just gay? So she used it to squelch that desire. When she joined the military, she was bullied and had a couple of run-ins with officers, which I think is pretty significant given, like, when you're in the military, from my understanding, is you don't have a lot of back talk to officers, which is why I would have never been worked out well in the military.
Me too.
So in 2009, she was deployed to Iraq as an intel analyst, and that's really where this kind of story from her big case gets kind of some traction, because there she had access to classified information. So in 2009, because she's seeing all of this stuff, she begins to express discontent with the wars on Facebook. So she's using social media to talk about how, not necessarily what she's seeing, but like, are we really in this war for the right reasons? She reaches out during a leave to the Washington Post and to the New York Times to say, hey, I got a story for you. I'm looking at some information, and I have access to information. What we're doing in the war is not right. It's unethical, and it needs to be reported on. Those newspaper outlets never returned her call. And she eventually reached out to WikiLeaks. Yeah. So, I mean, the thing is, so she said she reached out to the Washington Post, They never returned her call. The New York Times, she reported to the ombudsman, and they're like, we get hundreds of these a day. Like we didn't think anything of it. And so when she returns back to Iraq, she proceeds to download hundreds of thousands of documents and videos detailing war logs, private cables, assessments of prisoners, and videos that are just outlining or detailing torture, abuse, and 15,000 civilian deaths, which again never gets reported. I mean, we hear about the deaths of our soldiers, but we don't really hear about, and we get reports on the news about the enemies that we targeted, but never those civilian deaths really get reported. And so this was, Chelsea was like, this is wrong, right? This is not our mission in Iraq and Afghanistan. Of course, the military leaders, and after hearing all these stories, right, they're like, what right? How arrogant is this soldier to be the one being like, I'm going to tell everyone what's right and what's wrong, right? So like, she didn't have the wherewithal to really know, and shouldn't have not felt entitled to go speak to or drop this information to WikiLeaks. So I say that because that kind of leads to some of the debate and controversy around Chelsea Manning. So in 2010, she uploaded all of this information to WikiLeaks. And later that year, WikiLeaks releases a video from their data dump, from Chelsea Manning's data dump, which shows a helicopter crew shooting at civilians because they mistook a telelens for a weapon. So what they thought was a camera, what they thought was a weapon was actually a camera lens, and then they killed these civilians. And so that was kind of the big thing that leaked into the news and really kind of garnered headlines. And of course, the news cycle just picked that up, right? Yep. And there was a big controversy. So do you guys remember any of this stuff as it was going on?
Yeah, what I remember is, if I remember correctly, the Democrats at the time did not like Chelsea Manning because it was during a Democratic administration.
Well, that's why I was saying I didn't pay attention to the storyline, because I'm like, if I don't know anything about it, then...
And nowadays the Democrats are, a whistleblower, blah, blah. It reminds me of the guy with the Pentagon Papers. I forget his name. I was about to say a huge historical figure, but you think I'd remember his name.
Yeah, you think three of us self-proclaimed history nerds would.
And went to college. Listen to me. Went to jail for leaking a bunch of papers, kind of about the travesties of the Vietnam War. And it took a long time for us to speak about him in a way that was like an American hero, which to me he was.
Yeah.
And right now the verdict's out. And unfortunately it complicates things that Bradley has now turned to Chelsea, because now someone's discounted. Gender is politicized.
Yeah.
Because people say, let's face it, I grew up in a conservative religious environment, and people that are trans are considered mentally ill. Mm. So what do you do with a mentally ill person? You say, well, nothing they say matters.
Yeah, you discount
real. They're never in their right mind. They're kind of insane. They need to be committed. So that adds a different layer.
And even if you don't even if people don't have that attitude that they're mentally ill, like, it just discounts things. It's like, like they're an attention seeker or whatever.
They can choose that way, and they're just emotionally disturbed.
And so it's
or
like,
if
they're an attention seeker, then they're trying to seek attention with this whole...
But, a little bit, to that point, right? I mean, Chelsea Manning was going through a lot. I mean, initially they didn't, when that data was released, they weren't like, oh, Chelsea Manning did it, or Bradley Manning. So Manning knew, the result of what happened, of her sharing information with WikiLeaks. That video, she knew that it was her that put that information out there. So she's dealing with that, and even besides, as significant as that is for the United States, she's dealing with the fact that she's trans, right? That's her major struggle day to day, right? She knows.
Came out while she was in prison, right?
She came out the day after she was sentenced. So she's dealing with that. Like, that's her. If you look at interviews with her, she's like, basically she was approaching it like, I had nothing to lose, because my biggest struggle wasn't I took great exception to what the U.S. was doing in these wars. But I was struggling my day-to-day with my identity, like who I was, right? And I couldn't be myself. And so that's kind of what was going on. No one was listening. And so eventually she gets arrested because she confides in an online stranger, Adrian Lamo, who was a hacker. And Lamo contacted the Department of Defense once Chelsea told him what happened. Interestingly enough, Adrian Lamo is no longer alive. He died at age 37. They don't know.
We can blame it on Lamo.
Well, he said blame it on Lamo. He said he got again. I didn't do too much research on him, so this is just
30 something.
37. So I just read kind of his wiki bio, and yeah, I guess he was very involved in the LGBT community. He was a hacker, and they don't know how he died. He mysteriously died. They did an autopsy on him, and the coroners could not confirm why he died. But anyway, so I just given you see all these things like House of Cards and these conspiracy theory movies, and I'm like, the fact that they don't know how this guy died at age 37.
It's a true crime.
Yeah. So there you go, our spoopy.
Oh yes.
So again, Manning was arrested in 2010, charged with 22 counts relating to the leaks, and in 2011 there were additional charges dropped on her for aiding the enemy because some of the material that she had was found in Bin Laden's compound when they did that raid. Were you gonna say something, Tony?
So this just popped into my mind. Is she in prison?
So let me get to that.
Okay.
Because that's a little. It's an interesting question. She's not in prison, but she's in jail. So during her time, she was deemed to be suicidal and had while she was in jail before her hearings, or before she was tried, because she was she
tried it.
Yeah, she tried it. She was deemed suicidal. Had several run-ins with the officers. She was actually part of the controversy here is and this is where she started to get some allies on her side because she was held in solitary confinement. So basically that was 23 hours a day in a windowless cell. She was out one day, and because she had attempted suicide previously, they deemed her to be suicidal. So they didn't even give her a pillow or blankets to sleep with. So a lot of times they had her sleeping nude too as well. So here she is.
On a concrete floor.
Yeah, in a windowless cell, 23 hours a day. That's how she's spending her time. Once she did visit a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist is like, she's not suicidal anymore. They still kept her in solitary confinement because, so she was held in solitary confinement initially because of the crimes she committed and the trouble she was causing with officers. Then which would drive you crazy, I would think. Then she attempts suicide, and the punishment for that is more solitary confinement. Again, imagine that would put anyone, I think, on the rails.
Yeah.
But if you're transgender going through this emotional journey, I can't. So that's all screwed up. So that I'm putting this out there because this is, I think, plays factors into what happens a little bit down the road. So she in 2013 she pleads guilty to storing and leaking information. She said she was trying to stir a debate. She didn't think that national security was at stake. She was just trying to say, hey, look what's going on here, guys. Yeah. But again, a lot of the information that she leaked was detailing information about captives and locations of the base. In retrospect, looking back, there's articles that saying it wasn't that controversial in terms of what she released, but nonetheless, there was all the arguments from the Republican side and even the Democrats at the time, classified information, right? So she apologized for hurting the U.S. On July 30th. She was found guilty of 20 counts, espionage, theft, and computer fraud. And then on August 21st, which is this week, she was sentenced to 35 years in prison. Again, the day after she was sentenced, she comes out as transgender. We were going to say something.
Yeah, so she was sentenced to a male prison.
Yes.
Yeah.
So she's coming out transgender, right? Because she says, "Hey, because the question to her was like, well, why'd you come out then?" Yeah. She's like, "I had to live my life." That's, yeah. And again, that burden of I dropped all this information to the public was kind of off her shoulders. So she's like, now I can really just deal with this major issue that's been battling me with my whole life, which is being transgender. So during that time, since in the 7 years she was in prison, she had 2 attempts at suicide. And the biggest struggle during her in addition to battling suicide attempts, she was fighting for her rights as a transgender woman. So in prison, if you're sick, you get medical treatment. Well, not that being transgender is sick, but it requires some medical attention. And what she would say is, hey, being trans, that was a big part of what she was going through. just a side note, ACLU, when she came out as trans, immediately stepped in to help her get hormone treatment, because she said, I needed that hormone treatment.
Yeah.
It was not a preference, right? It's not like I wanted those drugs. She's like, it's a matter of survival. It's what keeps, what she said is like, what keeps me alive. It keeps me from feeling like I'm not in the wrong body. Because she said every day she was wanting, when she wasn't on hormone treatment or the medication that she was receiving, she wanted to rip her body apart. She's and the folks from ACLU say that, the reason they were fighting for it, because it's important to realize that medical treatment for transgender people is not cosmetic. It's not experimental. It is something that they need to, make their full transition to, who they are.
There's a direct line between her and Donald Trump banning transgender people from being in the military, because he says it's expensive and they all want free surgeries, and you're going to have transgender people joining the military to transition.
Surgery, yeah.
And he's using this as a high-profile example of that.
But I mean, to me, this was a big learning for me, because I admitted on this show before, like, I don't have a lot of familiarity with the trans community, and so reading the story and listening to Chelsea's kind of journey and the aspects of what she says of why she needed medical treatment, I'm like, this all makes sense. Because all I would hear, it's not that I would ever side with Donald Trump, but I was like, okay, is that right? I mean, my immediate reaction anytime Donald Trump says something is he's wrong, but I always try to process it, and so I was like, so what is the real story? And so this kind of crystallized to me kind of some aspects of the transgender journey. Your question on whether she was still in jail. So Obama, on his near the end of his administration, he commuted her sentence. And so he said, she's went through the military process, she acknowledged her wrongdoing, and she went through a tough prison sentence. The sentence she received was very disproportionate relative to what other leakers received. So she received 35 years of prison time, and he said that's not consistent with how other leakers have been treated. He said Obama said she had served a significant amount of time. It made sense to commute and not pardon her sentence. And he says, I feel comfortable that justice has been served and a message has still been sent to people.
So commute means she's out, but it's on her record.
Right.
Okay.
And so that was, again, a big thing. Currently, Chelsea Manning, she's living in Maryland. She ran for Senate in 2018, so she tried to take a run at the Democratic Senate candidate, Ben Cardin, in Maryland. She's currently in jail. So she had been asked to testify in a grand jury investigating WikiLeaks, because now that Julian Assange has he's been pulled out of that embassy that he was holed up in. So they're trying him, and she's been asked to testify. She said nope. So she's been held in contempt for not cooperating. She said she would rather starve to death than change her opinion to this regard. So
good for her.
Yeah, so she's fighting the good fight. She's very popular. I mean, they did a spread on her. Like Annie Leibovitz did a photo shoot with her, so she was in Vanity Fair. She's gone to all these high-profile LGBT events. She was a columnist in The Guardian for The Guardian. A guest columnist a few times while she was in prison. She's got a big following on social media, so she's quite. She's been this celebrated as a character, as a transgender person, and but obviously a lot of controversy because with what she did with releasing all that information, some folks call her a big traitor. And and that's what you hear a lot on Fox News. Of course, as Kendall was noting, you heard that from the Dems as well. When it happened, but a lot of folks have where that was kind of the prevailing sentiment at the time. Like when this information was leaked, now you see, I think, a lot more people coming to her side. I mean, obviously,
I agree.
Obama commuted her and said, she was more or less a whistleblower, right? Yeah. She shouldn't have done it. There were proper channels for her to do. But and what to that point, Obama said, when it comes to our national security, that whenever possible, we need folks that may have legitimate concerns. We need them to raise those. He said that they try to work through the established channels and avail themselves to the whistleblower protections that have been put in place. Because what folks will say is, well, why didn't she go up the chain of command? Why didn't she, talk to her representatives, her House reps, her state reps, anything like that? Chelsea maintains no one was listening, and so she's like, even those proper channels didn't work, and so I had no choice but to do this. So. To me, again, it was an interesting story because, like I said, I hadn't paid attention to it. I knew the political ramifications of it. I didn't really ever dive into kind of the transgender component to it. But I feel a bit more woke on transgender issues. So I don't know. You guys remember anything else
I
about
remember
that?
snippets of it, but I never really paid that much attention to it.
She's still in the news. You still hear about her all the time.
Well, like I said, she's in jail now, but ran for Senate, which I thought was, I mean, I saw her political campaign. I thought was interesting. She was basically she to me was on the Bernie wing of things, so fighting the establishment.
Well, come on, Chelsea and Marsha.
So I think, Kendall, though, your topic provides a nice cap to this, given we've talked about a couple of transgender cases.
The trans flag that Monica Helms.
I just saw one on the way here.
Designed on August 19th, 1999. And I feel like we're seeing the trans flag, which it's like light blue, pink, and white.
Yeah.
We're seeing it more and more, I'd say in the last year.
I agree. I feel like I knew what it was, but I never really saw it much. And I've seen it just a handful of times, but I've seen it just here and there.
Well, the flag represents a trans community, and it's the original trans flag, but there's been more so than the gay pride flag. There's been kind of offshoots to where different groups design their own gay flag and have their own or trans flag, I should say.
Wait, you saying folks have their own trans flag?
The trans flag more so than any other of the LGBT
Q
plus groups. Has many multiples, and I'll get into that. So the flag represents a transgender community and consists of 5 horizontal stripes, 2 light blue, 2 light pink, and 1 white in the center. So
you mean it's Creamfield?
A Creamfield flag, yes.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
Don't tease me.
So Helms said the
Is he
stripes
cute?
at the top and bottom are light blue, the traditional color for baby boys. The stripes next to them are pink, the traditional color for girls. The stripe in the middle is white for those who are transitioning or consider themselves having a neutral or undefined gender. So she designed it in 1999. It was first shown at the Phoenix Pride Parade in 2000. And then it caught on quickly, and in 2014 she actually donated it to the Smithsonian Natural History Museum.
That's awesome.
Wait, what is it? Yeah, Smithsonian Natural History Museum said, "Oh, we want it." So within just 5 years, she gave it, which has got to be kind of awesome.
Wait, 5 years?
Yeah, 2014. She designed it in 99.
That's more than
14,
4. That's
15.
That's 15 years.
Oh my God!
You're not a math guy.
It's not even that close. Where's my calculator? Okay, but anyway, in 15 years, I guess. Is that right? 85. Between 1 and 57 years.
Anyways, in her lifetime.
She donated it. In 2015, Philadelphia was the first county government to raise the flag in honor of Philadelphia's 14th annual Philadelphia Trans Health Conference. So by 2015, which is 16 years from the day it was designed, it was kind of this ubiquitous, we're seeing it more and more. Governments are embracing it more. And in January 2019, Congresswoman from Virginia, Jennifer Wexton, flew it outside of her office.
She's transgender.
No.
No?
Jennifer Wexton? No.
There was a transgender person. I'm sorry.
That was in the Virginia state.
Yeah, that's the state legislature.
Oh, but she's also running for Congress now, right?
Okay.
I think so, yeah.
But by March, there had been dozens of Congress people that had flown it for trans awareness, trans visibility, which I think is, we were saying the gay pride flag has been around since the 70s. And I feel like I've seen it for almost my entire life. It's kind of been there.
That, yeah.
But we've just seen the trans flag. There's several variations of it. The most common second variation of it, I should say, is what's called the black trans flag. So instead of the white line in the middle, it's black to raise awareness for black, the disproportionate
that's awesome.
amount of violence and murder and discrimination for black trans women. even meant black
Yeah,
trans
because
women.
even within, and not only trans, but I feel like LGBT people, black LGBT people, like they're so discriminated in their own community because, a lot of black people are very religious and they just face, I feel, more discrimination than most. Yeah.
To me, it's a shame that we need a separate flag. I get it. But it creates separation. It shows a sense of nobody's looking out for me, so let me separate myself.
I guess
and create a different.
I mean, I can see both sides. I kind of agree that it creates a separation, but then to them, I think it's their way of pointing out, like, I mean, more of us are murdered than white people. Like more black people are murdered, more black trans people are murdered than white people. Mm-hmm. So I can understand them wanting to emphasize the point that, we are a little worse off. But then I agree to your point too, that it's,
But isn't it like the Black Lives Matter, argument saying, when you take that position, Kendall, I'm not saying that you do this, but it sounds a little all lives matter, right? It's like, oh, all lives matter. And it's like, there are folks like, yes, all lives do matter, but the Black Lives Matter is part. Like, we feel like we're not even noticed. Like, we're not part of that all.
You feel misrepresented, so I think it's more so for me a conversation of, I hate I don't hate anything. I really don't care that much. But I don't understand the emphasis on LGBTQIA. You're queer. It's umbrella queer. We're all fighting together, I feel like.
But
when you throw in new letters, new symbols, and all that, it's kind of like, okay, who do we have to include now? It's like, it's against to me, heterosexual mindset of we're in control. We are the ones making decisions. We're the ones that are right in God's eyes. So to me, I just prefer
queer
to say queer instead of alphabet soup in it.
But then when you do that, then you run the risk of what we talked about this with Marsha P. Johnson, right? I mean, when not specifically Marsha P. Johnson, but when we were having that discussion about trans and why it's important to make sure that the trans community is included and all that. I mean, when you just say queer, you're missing folks, right? You're missing bisexual folks. You're maybe not representing lesbians. You're not because you're rallying around one common thing when each of those constituencies. Maybe that's not the right word. Demographics have the right, have a different preference. I mean, admittedly, from our own podcast, right? We don't have anyone who's black. We don't have a lesbian on our show, so we are missing part of the conversation. I mean, I know Tony's a lesbian, but like
I just changed my garbage disposal.
You did. You are so butch. We're gonna give you a.
There's that
butch
argument.
lesbian.
There's also the argument that when you separate it by so many different variations, that you are segregating within the community different groups, which is fine if that's the intention. But what I'm saying is, are we all in this together, or are we saying there are lesbian rights, there are gay rights, there are bisexual rights, there are transgender rights, there are intersexual, there are asexual.
I don't even know if it's rights, but it's just like concerns, right? So there are different things that are need to be represented. So when we talked about this earlier, right, with the whitewashing of LGBT history, it's like, well, no, the black community has it worse. Like you were saying, when you hear the F word, right, it's like, yeah, you heard the F word, you're like, oh, or you're funny for a gay guy, or you're cool for a gay guy. I would hear that you're cool for a gay guy and you're cool for a brown guy. Like I would get it double, you know what I mean? And so it's not to say that I said black people have it worse. Like I'm not trying to compare the two. All I'm saying is there's different concerns. Like you can be cool for a white gay guy, but I have to work doubly hard to be cool for a brown gay guy. You know what I mean?
That's why I can kind of see both sides, because I do get your point that it's like, okay, I mean, geez, it's the alphabet soup. It's like, does everyone really need to be like, I'm in this little subsector? But I kind of understand, like, everybody kind of wants to be like, I'm not part of this general, like, here's my specific need. And I guess it kind of also, relates to when straight people are like, well, why do you need a pride celebration? Well, you haven't fucking thank God you don't need a pride celebration. Yeah, I could get fired for being gay.
Because straight people could say, aren't we all just people?
And so then I could, you know, like I could see if you were whatever part of the.
That was my straight guy accent. Oh, we all just people.
It does seem to me, as a straight person, that
Wait,
wait, no, I'm not speaking from the straight. What I think,
if you were,
what I hear is the argument of, oh, we got something, you know, there's terms for everybody, and yes, those terms do exist. However, to me, it's like, no, we're all people.
yeah.
First of all, let's acknowledge that we're people first, and then go from there.
But even amongst white people, there are people. There's Yankees and there's Southerners, right? And then there's the hardcore, the Dixiecrats, and then there's Texas Southern, and you know what I mean. So like everyone's got their own identity. Like everyone wants to have their own identity. I guess my point is
colleges.
They can both be true, right? So. I guess my where I take issue, and I say it too, like, oh, I'll roll my eyes. I'm like, now we have to be sensitive to this group. Like, we can't be like be sensitive to my group, and then when you want something,
well, why
like,
do you say LGBTQ plus? If it's a stickler for you, what is the plus? Who is the plus
else
that you refuse to acknowledge?
well, I just don't know. On
well, see, that's what? I think that honestly, your answer right now is more so. There are so many.
Yeah,
and we're not.
Because I think it keeps growing, right?
It keeps growing, and we're not doing the research to figure out. We're just saying, how is that any different? How is plus different than the word queer?
I'm not saying it is or isn't.
Your umbrella is plus.
What does
mine
the A stand
is
for?
queer,
Q-
asexual.
Oh, okay.
See, so in other words, when you have so many letters, and we have to, as gay people,
Because
sit around
A
and
could
say,
be anybody. Straight people can be
But,
asexual.
but as
A?
gay people, we're just one of those letters, right?
But what good are you doing if you don't even know what the I and the A and the Q
Right.
and the...
I know what I...
You know what I'm saying? So for me, the thinking is...
I would be fine with, like, gay, queer, whatever.
Really, in
But
my
maybe
mind,
it's 'cause I'm gay.
the majority is heterosexual, and because they don't understand, many of them, not all of them obviously, but because many of them think it's a sin or a mental disorder or something, if you're anything but heterosexual, then to me the line is drawn. We are everybody else, and we have the same rights as you. So within the queer community, yes, you can, and I really don't care the terms people use. I choose to use queer because I think people nowadays throw out the words. They don't even know what it means, but they're just using it because they're trying to be PC. And I think I asked you, Tony, and you knew, but I'm saying, do you even know what the Q means? It means questioning in queer.
Right.
But what does queer mean within LGBTQIA?
That's the thing. I mean, because then it means everything, right? Yeah.
Like,
I mean, yeah, it's like you said.
But we don't even know, so why are we using
But
words
Tony,
we don't know?
do you identify as queer?
Identify as gay.
Yeah, right. So that's, I guess,
To me, queer is different, and so it's like, yeah, I'm different. I mean, I identify as gay within but if you use, I'm fine with using queer as the umbrella or gay as the umbrella, but it's like, maybe that's because I'm gay and I fit the most classic mold versus, you know, if I was bisexual.
But this
or
kind of
lesbian.
goes back
Questioning.
to the very beginning of our conversation, to where even within the gay community, we're very segregated.
Yeah.
Very. So when you say LGBTQIA plus or whatever
kind
it
of
is,
promote segregation.
you are putting walls in between people. And here we are talking about how we shouldn't talk about femmes in a certain way. Yet we're calling them femmes.
Well, I don't even say it's talking about femmes. People identify as femme. There is a class of gays that say I'm a femme queen, right? That's a category that people, walk in.
Because some people are ashamed, some people own it.
It's just a matter of don't shame people because that's what they are, right? Don't discriminate people. I mean, you can discern, like, I don't say discriminate, like, you can have a preference of who you're attracted to, but having to say, those people are gross because they're femme, like, that's the line. And so I guess the point that I would make, Kendall, is when you say, well, I'm just going to call everyone queer. Well, not everyone identifies as queer. That's a term that is appropriate for you, but not everyone identifies as queer. And so for us to say, why do we have...
Some are trying to get to catch on to mean the queer, non-straight community.
Right.
And we're even divided. If you go on Grindr or Scruff or whatever, it's no fats, no femmes, no blacks, no whites,
Yep.
it's
But even on then too.
so I am choosing not to focus on what makes us different. I think.
But even those apps, I mean, they ask you like, oh, what are your tribes? You know, like, and you select like, oh, these are the 16 things you can select. Like, I'm into twinks or whatever.
Right. Is that what you're into, Tony? What are your preferences, Tony? Into twinks?
Clean cut.
Clean
And I
cut.
think sometimes
Not
we
twinks,
get so focused
Like a bear,
on
an
the
otter.
specific details.
Alive.
I love
Breathing.
We're trying to get
until next episode.
Tony a boyfriend here.
I mean, now we've got cisgender and gender non-binary, which I agree is a thing and exists.
Yeah.
But it's people saying, "Look over here. I'm different.
Mm-hmm.
Think about me." And now you're discriminating against me. I get all that. I can understand and have a full breadth of the entire conversation without feeling like it goes to the extreme of saying,
But I can,
which
and
letter are you?
And I can see both sides though, because I could see if you're like, if somebody thinks, okay, this is like the general needs of like the gay community, and you're like a subsect, and you're like, but this is like what like my needs, you know, like.
But then it's just throwing letters together. Then, if you're saying my needs are not what your needs are, then why are we saying? Why are we putting
their stance
every
is,
alphabet?
Just like, you know, drag queens or transgender people back in the day, like, that were being discriminated against, like, bitch, I'm part of this community. And so, I don't know, maybe they feel the need to, like, point out that I'm here and I'm this
But
subsect.
how's that doing, really?
I don't know.
I think it's actually having it's having the opposite effect, is what I think.
Well, I mean, I guess
I think it's dividing us more than uniting us.
I don't know. I think it's creating an uncomfortable conversation saying, to me, it always challenges my thinking, because my initial reaction is where you are, Kendall. Like, why do we need another letter? But then I'm like, as we have this conversation today about trans people, I'm like, I have a different appreciation for trans people than I
Yeah.
and as you talk to more and more people are comfortable being trans, like that T is important in the LGBT discussion. So if we just called everyone,
yes.
but if we just called everyone queer, then they'd be like, well, that's the trans people could easily think, oh, they're just talking about the gays and the white gays, right? And the ones that look pretty and, you know, that are Instagram worthy. And so I think there's a space for it. Like,
Should we differentiate between trans, white trans, black trans, brown trans?
well, your point is that they do, right? There's a reason.
There be an LGBT?
No, but here's my thing. So, in a way, I can see where it's further dividing us. But then, in a way, I feel it's mind-opening, because some of these, like cis, you know, whatever, every time I see a new term, I'm like, well, what is that? I don't know. And I'll Google it, and, like, I want to know more. And so it kind of opens up my mind.
Like that, yes.
Whereas some people, I feel it's the opposite effect. And it's like, oh, fuck, now we got another, you know, thing, you know, another acronym or, you know, letter to worry about. And so maybe it just part of, like, sometimes it opens up some people's mind and it, like, segregates others. And so maybe it's just I don't know.
And I think it's a good discussion that we're having, though. Like, not just the three of us, but in general that society's having. It's like, oh, wait, I thought this was just a whole gay thing. And it's like, well, no, there's a whole bunch of folks that have different, that identify differently, and that's okay. We're okay with that.
Well,
and
I'm not trying to call you out. But to say plus completely negates your entire,
I agree,
in my
I agree.
mind, argument.
Okay, but
to correct someone and say plus, to me, your plus is my queer.
Okay, fine. But the plus to me is the same as it's etc. Right? Your queer is like I may not identify with the term queer. Is my point? So that's I think the differentiator in my mind. I'm not. My point is you can call me out for saying plus, and you're saying that's not any better.
We also have polyamory.
You didn't invent the plus. You're
pansexual
just using the
But my
why
point
is
is
there not a P on there, and why is there not a C for cisgender?
that
Why is there
it's all
not
encompassed
a-
under the plus.
Well, why do we?
But
why is there a plus? Why wouldn't it be? I know this may sound really in the weeds to a lot of people, but if you say plus, why are we choosing to say LGBT plus?
Look, I say plus. Then not everyone says plus. I mean, you want to call me out on that? That's fine. I don't take exception to that. I think I have a lot to.
I'm trying to make you understand where
I'm just saying I have a lot.
Coming
I think
from.
we all have a lot to learn and grow in this space. That would be my point. Like,
not in these pants.
And you can't even loosen the belt because you're not wearing one.
I can't even sit down. I've been standing up the entire broadcast because of these pants.
So what else is going on with that flag?
That's it.
It was flown on
Just waving.
2014 though. It's not displayed in any of the museums. Is what I read. It's they have it archived.
Yeah,
but
they have
not,
archived like they have thousands upon thousands of stuff archived.
waiting for that LGBT plus
Museum.
museum.
At this rate.
Yes. So hopefully we can do that. Kendall will gold plate your mic so that it's in the
That's
Hall of
going to be a
Fame.
big sign though.
What's that?
LGBTQIPA.
It's just gonna be. They won't have a sign. It'll just be a big rainbow with all of the colors. This way it looks pretty. All right, so that wraps up our lengthy discussion. I think it was good discussion because to me, like I said, the discussion on Marsha P. Marsha.
Oh my God, he thinks it's Martha.
Marsha
She
P.
identifies as Martha.
On Chelsea Manning and then trans flag. Like I mean, to me, it was a good discussion we've had on that. I think a lot of people have questions about, and I think it's an evolving conversation. So that I think is a good thing. Again, the fact that we're discussing it is a very good thing for all of us, not just again the three of us, but I think society as a whole. So thank you for for anyone who's listening, and for you two guys that are listening, that are joining me in this conversation. Thank you for letting me think that out loud, like trying to process that, because to me it's been rattling in my head.
It's always a good discussion.
And so I don't always know how to like the LGBTQ plus. Like,
and honestly, Thomas, there's not a wrong. I choose to say queer because that makes more sense to me. You choose to say LGBTQ plus. But it is confusing. The reason I wanted to have a conversation, it's confusing, especially to straight people. Like I have straight friends that say, "No, what is this? What is this? What is your
right?"
And they get lost in the weeds of it all. Of like, well, what does it all mean? And to me, it basically means, look, there are people that don't just identify straight, and it's not just straight or gay. There's a huge spectrum of people that it can involve.
And I think
we're just calling it different things.
That's the big conversation that we are having as a society, and I think it's important. And now, again, I'm glad that transgender people are being part of the discussion, and I'm looking forward to learning more about people who identify differently. Because, and like I said, unfortunately, I didn't know a lot of gay people growing up, and so now I have a different appreciation for the upbringing. I'm studying these transgender folks. I have a different appreciation for that. So to me, it's always fascinating to learn about people and have these discussions. So I'm really thankful for today's discussion. So anything else? All right. So thank you guys for listening to our podcast and kikiing with us. A special thank you to our sound dude, Spencer. And don't forget to subscribe to hear future episodes. Visit our website at letstalkaboutgaystuff.com. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Let's Talk About Gay Stuff, and on Twitter at Talk Gay Stuff. You can also reach us, send us your questions. Again, we do read those things, and we're happy to bring those up in our discussion.
We love getting comments too.
Yes,
Thank you, Dusty.
You can email us at letstalkaboutgaystuff.com or let's talk about gay stuff at gmail.com. And don't forget to give a listen to our sister podcast, Our Spoopy Podcast, which is available now. So be sure to listen to them, subscribe to their episodes, give comments on them and reviews. We'll take those reviews as well. We'd like to know your feedback. So with that, we're here.
We're LGBTQ+.
I was about to say we're queer. Get used to it.